Welcome to the GSMC Business News Podcast, the show dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning business, technology, and the stock market. Get a head start on the day as we keep you updated on the latest goings-on Wall Street, money, jobs, and technology. If you're looking for a podcast to keep you informed and ahead of the game in business, the GSMC Business News Podcast has you covered.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC Business News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Moriah, and today we'll be talking about mergers and acquisitions. A lot of times during business, you may need to merge with another brand or another business or an investor in some cases for many different reasons. You could be going bankrupt, unfortunately. You could just see a need in the market that you're not able to fulfill all the way by yourself and would need some outside help from some of the experts. So there's many different reasons why a business will merge with another business. You have a lateral merge, you have horizontal mergers. There's different types. There's different type of acquisitions. A lot of times it has a lot to do with your assets, different asset classes. Again, just many reasons. So we're going to be talking about that today. We're going to get into a few case studies. You know, I like to do my research. We're going to see some famous mergers that occurred, some current mergers that's going on right now in 2021. With the pandemic, I'm not sure if you're aware, but a lot of business have had to merge. There is just a few different reasons. Normally, in my experience, the reason why businesses tend to merge is due to some type of financial reason. For example, there was a case of Sprint and T-Mobile doing a merger. Sprint was just not able to keep up with the demand, although they had a pretty wide market. Sprint normally was used in construction, and if you remember the walkie-talkie phones, we used to call them chirp phones. They had a pretty big market. Eventually, that market was no longer needed. Not sure why you would need to chirp anyone at this point. You would just send them a text or a FaceTime call. So they had to begin to see other options. They had to see what they were going to do. You never want to just close the doors on your business. You want to see how you can keep them going or renew them, right? So that's normally when a merger or an acquisition happens. Acquisition is normally business A, am coming to take business B, and we're going to make it something different. That's normally what happens with an acquisition. A merger is normally just that you merge with another business, either to create a new business or to create a dual business. So we're going to be getting into that today. And then, of course, we always discuss how you can merge with another brand. It doesn't matter if you're a big brand or a small brand. There's always room to merge with another brand. I personally am a big fan of collaboration. So mergers are not always bad. Sometimes they are forced on a company, and those who get the bad end of the stick, I should say, are normally the little guys on the front lines. So in some companies, you're looking at your cashiers, your telephone reps, your supervisors, your employees who have been there for 20, 30, almost, years. They're the ones who normally are affected by it. If you've been paying attention during the pandemic, and I want to say the beginning in 2020, early spring, we saw a lot of individuals get laid off. I knew a lot of individuals close to me who were laid off as well that did start to get into the color lines. So you saw some people of color and some African Americans were the first to go, and then the companies, they went back through their list of employees and did second round and third round. Some companies even did 4 rounds of cuts. They're down to just their high-level management. So there are also some ethical concerns with mergers and acquisitions because of who's always affected in the end. So we're just going to be discussing that today. And then, of course, my favorite segment of all the episodes is the Hometown Heroes. We're going to be talking about some local folks who decided to join forces and just reach more community in their area. So today is going to be a pretty good show. All right, so let's hop right into it. Let's just get right into mergers and acquisitions. Understanding mergers and acquisitions, it's not really hard, but you just want to pay attention. They're interchanged a lot, but they definitely have their own meanings. So when one company takes over another established company and establishes it as the owner, they have purchased that company, and that's what an acquisition is. Now you have a merger, and it can describe, again, two firms of the same size or different sizes, and they join forces to move as a new entity rather than separate owned businesses. So that's the major difference. Acquisition is normally someone purchases and establishes themselves as the owner of that brand. A merger, it's normally equal when someone's joining together. So one case would be Benz and Chrysler. They merged, and now they are Daimler Chrysler. Both the stocks went to the new company, and new company stocks were issued. Now, a purchase deal, again, is when both of the owners or both of the CEOs say, okay, you are coming to purchase my brand. This is how much it costs. That's why it's good to have that business plan that we always tend to harp on, because that will show you the net worth. We'll give you an idea of the net worth, and then you just want to go through your budget and your expenses and, your balance sheet and your income statements and things of that nature to see how much the company is actually worth. You want to do an appraisal of the company. You also want to let the government know that you will be, closing the door on this brand. Because there are in certain states, you do have to pay to close a business, and you do have to pay for certain things. So there are fees. Normally, the CEO who is purchasing the next brand is the one who normally fronts the bill for that. But different strokes for different folks. So you just want to be mindful and be very honest when going through an acquisition or a merger, so that everyone is aware of what's going on, and there's nothing like what's called a hostile takeover. And that's where companies who don't want to be purchased kind of fall prey to the bigger brands, right? So it can be classified as a merger or acquisition. But normally those type of things are handled a bit more friendly. A hostile takeover is, hey, we're coming to buy it. It's not really much you can do, especially in some cases if you have a business name who has not been trademarked. You have some companies who just move a little unethical, and they will go and trademark the name, and because the first to do it is the first one to get it. In some cases, you can contest it, but that does take a long time. There are some big brands who patent things before the smaller brand is able to, because they're still building up the funding. So you will see in some cases there are some ethical things that do happen when it comes to mergers and acquisitions. But my hope is that you don't ever fall prey to that, and that you have a good merger or acquisition if you're ever in the need of it, right? So the different types of mergers and acquisitions. In mergers, the board of directors, again, for the two brands or the three or however many it is, they're looking for a combination, and they're looking for that combination of the brand. They're trying to see how they can do it, and then they want to seek those who own the company's approval. So there was a case back in the late 90s where there was a merger that occurred between Digital Computers and Compaq, and Compaq absorbed Digital Computers, so Compaq was the bigger brand, and they later merged with Hewlett-Packard in 2002. So that combined company became the new ticket that we see on the stock market, which is the HPQ. So that's just an example of the merger. Then you have what's called an acquisition. So to keep it plain, the bigger company gets the majority of the stake in the smaller company or the smaller firm, and they don't change their name, they don't alter their structure, they're literally just absorbing that company more so than joining forces with the company. And then you have what's called consolidations, and that just creates a new company by combining core business processes, abandoning your old structure. You might change the way that individuals can pay for certain subscriptions and things of that nature. So you'll see companies begin to consolidate. So, for example, again, back in the late 90s, there was Citicorp and Travelers Insurance Group, and they announced their consolidation, and it just became Citigroup. So that's what's considered a consolidation. Then you have tender offers, and that's when a company offers to purchase all of the outstanding stocks of another company at a special price other than what's on the market. And the company that is acquiring the smaller company will communicate the offer directly to the shareholders, and they don't have to, or they don't normally talk to your high-level management, your board of directors, and things of that nature. So an example would be in 2008 when Johnson & Johnson made a tender offer to acquire Amryx Biopharmaceuticals for a little over $400 million. And while the acquiring company still exists, especially if some shareholders are not willing to give up, most of those result in a merger. So they might give a tender offer, but normally in the end it ends up being a merger. Then you have where you can acquire assets. So in the acquisition of an asset, one company directly acquires the assets of another company. And the company whose assets are acquired has to have obtained approval by the shareholders. So those who own the company or have a share in the company, they have to approve that. And this is normally, I would say at this point it's gotten bad if your assets are being acquired. It's normally during some type of bankruptcy, and a company is bidding on another company. I'm sure you've seen in personal everyday life where individuals have to declare bankruptcy. They might have an eviction on a property, and everything in the home is being auctioned, and people are bidding on the things that are in the home, from clothes to jewelry to furniture. So normally when an acquisition of asset happens, it's because that company has to liquidate some assets to either pay those who they owe, and again, in most cases, it's resulting in some type of bankruptcy. Then you have management acquisition. It's known as MBO, or a management-led buyout. And that's when a company's executive purchases a controlling stake in another company, so bringing it from being public to private. And these executives normally partner with someone in finance, normally former corporate officers, in efforts to help pay for that transaction, right? So they're typically financed with debt, and majority of your shareholders must approve it. This can be tricky because if it doesn't work, then you'll go belly up as soon as you open the doors to the new merger, the new acquisition. So you just want to be careful when you're doing the different mergers, the different acquisitions. A lot of times, just because you merge with a company doesn't mean that the company is going to be successful. It could end up being a flop, and you might have just thought that was a really good business idea. And it just turns out that the public doesn't really vibe with what you've done. So you want to be careful. And then the structures of the merger, there's your horizontal merger, you have your vertical, you have your congeneric merger, market extension, there's a product extension, there's a conglomeration merger, there's many different types. So your horizontal merger is normally two companies that are on the same playing field. You might have L'Oreal and Estee Lauder, for example. Not saying that they're merging, but that's just an example of two direct competitors who share the same type of market, the same type of products, and that would be considered a horizontal merger. A vertical merger is normally a customer in a company or a supplier in a company. So you might want to think of a sneaker company that is merging with someone who makes shoelaces, a manufacturer. So the sneaker company is obviously bigger than the shoelace company, but they obviously need each other. Without sneakers, what are you putting the laces on? And without laces, it's going to be pretty hard walking in those sneakers. So that would be considered a vertical merger. Then you have your congeneric mergers, and that's normally two businesses that serve the same customer base, but they do it in totally different ways. So that would be an example of that. And then you have your market extension, and you might sell the same product but for two totally different markets. And then you have your product extension, where two companies might sell different but similar items. So I might sell juice, you might sell, energy drinks, and we somehow figure out a way to merge that together. So we're both selling some type of drinks. They're not really the same, but kind of related in a way. So that can be a little example of that. And then you have your conglomeration, and that's just two companies that have no common business. They have nothing in common. So just a wild example, you might have Dell Computers and Sprite Soda. Now that's an extreme example, but they're just two totally different brands, and somehow, some way, they saw a market need and decided to merge together. So those are your different types. We can get into the depths of those kind of examples in much more detail, but we do have to take a quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to get into some more examples of mergers and acquisitions. And then we'll begin to talk about how you may be able to merge with someone in your area, or you may need to be acquired by someone. And then we'll get into some hometown heroes. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Stay locked in.
Are you looking for a podcast that gives you all of the latest news from the world of finance? Then check out the GSMC Financial News Podcast. We'll delve into the ups and downs of the stock market, changes in the economy, and news from the world of real estate and technology. From breaking news on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, or the overseas market, to updates on the bond market, if there's money to be made, we'll cover it on the GSMC Financial News Podcast.
Today we're talking about mergers and acquisitions. We had a few examples given of different mergers and acquisitions that occurred in the late 90s, and just discussing the different type of mergers, the different type of acquisitions. There are different structured mergers. There's your horizontal merger. You have your acquisition of assets. You can consolidate. Individuals purchase other ones, so you might have a vertical merger, things of that nature. So right now, let's just discuss a little bit about how mergers and acquisitions are valued. So oftentimes people have these great ideas to merge companies, but someone has to purchase something from the other, or they might have to join finances. So you do have to value the company, and you want to make sure you're valuing it at the right price. I've read a study before that said, for example, some businesses, when you're a new business owner or you're in a specific minority group, you tend to undervalue your brand or your business or your assets. And in these type of situations, you want to make sure you're getting every shiny penny, right? You want to get every dollar that it is due to you, because a lot of times you work very hard. Not a lot of times, I would say all the time. Every business owner, for the most part, especially the ones that I know, work very, very hard to get the brands to where they are. And you want to make sure that you're being compensated correctly and you're not undervaluing, something that took you a long time to acquire, right? So let's get into it. How are they valued? So again, both companies involved are on one or the other side of the merger or acquisition deal, right? Someone's buying, someone's selling, or someone has to join forces and someone's offering their hand normally. So the seller normally, they're the ones who value the company. You try to do it at the highest price possible, but the buyer wants to buy for the lowest price possible. So you want to value the company at the correct price so that the one who's buying is not paying too little, and the one who's selling is not overselling, what the buyer is getting. So there's a few different ways that you can value the company. The first one that we're going to get into is the enterprise value to sales ratio, or the EV/sales. With the enterprise value to sales ratio, the acquiring company will make an offer as a multiple of the revenues, and they're also aware of the price to sales ratio of the other company in the industry. That's to put it in basic terms. That price earnings ratio, or the PE ratio, is normally when the acquiring company makes an offer that is a multiple of the earnings of the target companies or of the company that they're looking to purchase. So looking at all the stocks within the industry will give the company that's trying to purchase the other brand a good understanding for what the price to earning ratio is and should be. And then from there, you want to get your accountants involved and all of your number crunchers. I'm not the biggest number cruncher. I wish I had that gene to just sit and do numbers all day. I can get it done for my personal budget. I can get it done for the startup brands that I help with. I normally only assist in the startup phase. And then from there, I kind of push my little babies out the nest and hope that they fly. So I never really get to see the full valuation of the companies. But I think it's very interesting. And when you're first starting, your brand still has value. So a lot of times I will take a pause on the valuation. A lot of the valuation examples. A lot of times brands don't believe that they're worth anything because they're new. And that's never the case. That's why that business plan is important, because you want to have your price structure, that budget sheet, that income sheet, that accountant should be on deck at all times, because they're definitely the ones to help make sure you understand the value of your brand. For example, something as small as your website domain has value. So if this is a domain that's very simple, but very catchy, and it's never been used before, the values of I've seen some websites have a value of somewhere in the field of $100. And then I've seen some websites in the field of almost, 1,000 and up. Now, obviously, that will continue to grow depending on the brand. Obviously, a healthcare company's website will cost much more than, a startup sock or a startup bow tie company, right? But the little things, you might have a office space that you own. It might have been given to you as a gift when you started business. That office space has a value. All of your inventory, all of your assets, your debt, everything has to be considered. And so we want to go to those number crunchers, I like to call them, to get the right exact number, so that when you do go into these meetings for these acquisitions and these mergers, you do have the right price point. Nothing worse than being undervalued or oversold. Nothing worse than that. So another way to value the company would be a discounted cash flow, or your DCF. And that's a key valuation tool. A lot of individuals tend to use this one. It's just a little bit more simple. So you would do an analysis of a company's current value according to its estimated future cash flow. So it's almost like a forecasted cash or free cash. So you do your net income plus the depreciation value, and then you subtract your capital expenditures, and then you subtract the change in working capital. So all of that combined would give you that DCF, or that discounted cash flow. It's tricky, but it's only a few others, like your price to earnings ratio, for example, can really compete with this type of valuation system, or formula, I should say. And then you have what's called the replacement cost. So in some cases, an acquisition normally will be based on the replacement cost, or the cost of replacing the target company. So this is, again, one of those things that can compete with the DCF, or the discounted cash flow, that looks into the forecasting of future earnings. And that's how they base the valuation. Okay, in 10 years, we should be making this much based off of how much this company has made. That's their discounted cash flow. The replacement cost is just literally the cost of replacing the company. So to keep it simple, just take, for example, the value of the company is just the whole sum of equipment, staffing costs, and maybe the cost of the building. And that all comes up to, let's say, $50,000. So the company who's looking to buy it will literally ask to pay that price, and will replace it, and might add a $10,000, upcharge to it. So overall, to acquire everything in the brand, we're charging $60,000. Obviously, this is to keep it simple. We've seen mergers go into the billions. But for simple terms, and to keep it realistic for small business people with boots on the ground, we'll say the full cost to replace the brand is $60,000. Now, normally it takes a long time to get these done. Mergers and acquisitions don't happen overnight. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of contracts that have to be signed, things of that nature. But this is just the replacement cost is normally just the easiest way to value the company. It certainly, won't be the same for every type of, merger or acquisition. And then something to keep in mind with the mergers and acquisitions, a lot of times individuals, again, like we mentioned earlier, feel the brunt of this type of merger. So, for example, I knew one individual whose company was bought out by another company during the pandemic, and the individual who worked for the brand fell on pretty hard times. Now, right now, they are just now getting back on their feet. They have found other work. It's not paying as much as they were getting paid before the pandemic. Before the pandemic, I would say, to be a single individual, no children, they were doing very, very well. I'm talking savings, trips whenever, a PTO bank that anyone could envy. But life happened. And normally that's how these mergers and these acquisitions come to the little guy. So you'll see a lot of conflict when it comes to mergers. Companies will take a very long time to do a merger. I've seen one merger last almost 3 years because they just couldn't come to an agreement on the valuation. So if I'm not going bankrupt, I have a say in how this acquisition or this merger is going to go down, right? Unless it's one of those hostile situations. But again, that's normally when things have gotten so bad for the company being acquired that they really don't have much else, much else options in the matter. But the example of the individual I knew who was let go, that merger definitely affected them. And then with the pandemic, it's the shelter-in-place order, so that leads to some depression in some cases. Now, this individual, you could tell that they were going through some emotional currents because your career is just taken away from you. You work very hard, you go through school for this. You might take certain courses, certain classes to really get things up and going, and then just to have it all snatched away can be pretty difficult. What I can say is that this individual has came out swinging and started their own brand, and they're pretty on point with what they want to do. They had enough savings in the tuck. Normally, the companies consider the employees when they do have to let them go. So you'll see in some instances with mergers In acquisitions, the employees are given a payout, and normally that includes, in some cases, their full retirement package. Now, those can always be transferred to another type of account, so you don't have to necessarily tap into the retirement. However, during the pandemic, a lot of people I know had to tap into those retirement savings simply because they just had to keep up with their day to day. No one expected a shelter in place to happen. So a lot of individuals had to, you just have to do what you have to do. So mergers and acquisitions, although it can be great for the business owner who is acquiring the smaller brand or who is merging with another brand, oftentimes the employees are the ones who feel the brunt end of the stick. There was one lady, she was working at a job for about 30 years, close to 30 years, I want to say. It was a little under 30. And right before she hit 30, she was let go during the pandemic. And I want to say this is when I just got out of undergrad, so this was a few years ago. There was an individual who did fashion in New York, and she came to a store that I was helping to run. And she was just letting me know how she was always nervous because she just wasn't sure if she was going to be let go because she'd been there so long and the company was in the middle of a merge. So I was hired during the merger. And she was about to be let go because of the merger. So, they could bring me in for a lower price, fresh out of undergrad. They don't really have to pay me top dollar, right? So they could bring me in and groom me up and show me the way. Now that job didn't work out for me. I realized that, retail is not my thing, in that sense, being that in front of the customer retail worker just wasn't the best fit for me. I'm more so the background. I want to handle the paperwork. I want to handle the logistics. I want to handle delivery schedules and things like that. I'm more so the background girl. But while I was there, it was pretty fun. And just hearing her concerns and seeing the worry on her face, she had put in so much time with the company, and she just kept saying how they were just hiring more new faces and fresh faces, and they didn't really respect her tenure there. And so to hear those stories always made me interested in mergers and acquisitions, because I always wondered, do these companies really consider their employees? But sometimes what the employees don't know is the company is going under, so we might be able to afford to pay you, your salary. But after some business expenses are paid for and, annual bonuses are given, a lot of companies are just making ends meet. So you'd be surprised. I would say pay attention to some of your Yahoo financing, even Forbes sometimes when they give out their valuations of certain brands. I would say pay attention to that. I always love to keep up in the news and keep aware of what's going on in my field of business. And just seeing how these companies rank and how much they're worth and when they're merging and when they aren't. It's very important. You'd be surprised the brands that you have in your home who were a part of some type of company merger. All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to get into how you may need to merge within your own company, give some examples, and give some proper steps on what to do when acquiring someone to purchase a company from you. You might be the company wanting to be acquired, so we'll get into that, and then some hometown heroes. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay locked in.
Do you work in the world of marketing and advertising? Are you a media buyer or the owner of an agency? Have you been looking for a podcast to help stay on top of all the goings on of those worlds? The GSMC Marketing News Podcast is dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning marketing and advertising. Get the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast has you covered, whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand.
again. Today we're talking about mergers and acquisitions. We briefly discussed some cases in the late 90s of some mergers that took place with some computer brands. And then we discussed the different types of mergers that can take place. For example, you have your horizontal merger, which is me and you. We sell the same thing. We have the same market, and we're just looking to say, you know what, let's just combine forces. Let's join forces and let's really, move and shake within the industry. Then you have your vertical mergers where I may be a bigger brand like a sneaker company. I'm looking to merge with a smaller brand who specializes in, in funky shoelaces. I can tell that, they need some help. I have a need for some better laces, and so we join forces. So that would be an example of a vertical. And then you just have some who just acquire the other company, right? So this company may be going bankrupt. They need help. When we come in, we just swoop in and kind of save the day. Normally, those acquisitions oftentimes come from a company who may be experiencing some financial hardship and about to go belly up. So we gave some of those examples. Now, right now, I'm sure you're pretty aware that you might see some smaller companies join forces. They might do a quick collaboration just to test out to see if they will work well together. And then from there, they go on and do a full out merger. So in your day-to-day business, you may be a business owner, or you may work for a company who's going through a merger and you just want to be mindful of what's going on and how it happens. So let's get into how you and your brand may need to merge with another brand. So you may need to reach out to that brand, or that brand might be reaching out to you and you're just not really sure what to do just yet. Okay, so there are about 10 major steps that I think every small business, even a larger business, needs to be aware of when trying to merge successfully. Now, sometimes you may want to reach out to, your industry experts. Normally, there's some type of accountant or a legal team that you may have that assists you with handling acquisitions and mergers. So always reference the expert. I'm just here to give you some general knowledge, all right? So let's hop right in. The first thing you want to do is compare the business's corporate structure. So you want to look at your business, you want to look at the other business and see how they're structured so that you can see if your needs, can be met by acquiring this business or merging with this business. So, if you are a sole proprietor and you're looking to merge with a structured, business that it's a corporation, there's assets involved, there's many things involved. You might be on the other end of this merger. So while you might be trying to spearhead the merger, you may not make out as well if, revenue is not being acquired in similar ways. If you're in two totally different industries, if you have a subscription model and someone else may have, a regular, they make revenue by selling products, you want to just pay attention to how the companies are structured. And also you want to look into the legal structure of the merger. You want to pay attention to that. That's why I always say to reach out to the experts, make sure your legal team is on deck, because once the merger gets rolling, once you start executing that, things can get serious. It's not a quick thing to do a merger. A lot of mergers take some time, so you just want to be mindful of that. And then the next step, you want to look into the leadership of the company. Do you like how the leaders run their company? Can you see yourself working with them? Is this more so you trying to buy out the company? So are you looking for more of an acquisition because you don't like something about the way the leaders are running their company? Again, that's why I always say there are many reasons for why a company may need to merge or may want to acquire another company. So you want to pay attention to the leadership. So make sure that on your end and on the other end, you all are aligned and, your conversation it's making sense, it's moving forward. There's looking like there's progress that can be made. You just want to make sure you're all on one accord. You also want to begin to understand, is there going to be a board of directors? Is this going to be a partnership? So that, again, with that leadership, step 2, you just want to be mindful. Make sure you're paying attention and doing your research, okay? Because once you begin to pick officers, you want to make sure that everything it's a good, solid structure. So that's why you want to look at the business as well as the leaders. And then you want to compare the culture. So is your company more so high strung? Is it productivity oriented? Is everything about numbers? Or is your community more like a family and you're a team and do they treat each other like brother and sister? Do they have happy hour every weekend? Things of that nature. That's why, again, you want to pay attention to the business that you're looking to get into business with, right? You want to make sure the structure is okay. You want to make sure you and leadership are on the same accord. You want to make sure the company culture is a vibe and that everyone's on the same page, because you want to see how these employees will act once this merger occurs. Do they not like the merger? Will you run into problems because of that? A lot of times people tend to be loyal to who they're loyal to, and if they're loyal to a certain brand or a certain company and you come in trying to merge with that company, you don't want to have issues further down the line. So you just want to be mindful of the company culture that you're looking to join. And then you want to get into, once all that's been figured out, you realize everything's going smooth so far. You guys are on one page. The culture's kind of vibe. You see potential. Now you want to determine how you're going to brand. So will you remain the same? Will the name be a new name? Will it be a joint name? Will you use the same colors? Will you not? What's the new, your new sales proposition? What's your new vision statement? What's your new mission? Things of that nature. Are you going to keep certain things from one brand and implement new things from the other? So looking, this similar to the leadership and how you want to pay attention to make sure everyone's on one accord. Branding can go either good or bad, depending, because if you're a company who, say, has a bad track record with debt management, and then you merge with a company who has a great record, the talks get to going, and you never want to be in a position where it's going to be hard to brand this to a potential investor or potential customers because, there's some tainted views on one of the businesses. So you just want to be mindful, maybe you need to go through a full remodel and the full branding needs to be something totally different, new and fresh. So be mindful of that. And then the part that I love it, but I just wish there was an easier way. It's analyzing the financials, right? Again, that's going back to the debt conversation. Is this company good with money management? Are they about to be belly up? Are they a distressed business? It's easier to acquire businesses in distress simply because, they're in dire straits, right? So these are the companies, like we mentioned earlier, who may be about to go bankrupt, for example. That's all what you need to review. Is there financial due diligence? Is there a tax system in place? An accounting system in place? Is it easy to read their budgets and their spreadsheets and their income statements and their balance statements? And is it easy to calculate their assets and their liabilities? Is there some ambiguity with some of the numbers? Are there accounts missing that, you should be made aware of? Because you want to be as honest and as transparent as possible, because you guys are it's almost like marriage, right? So I'm not sure who's married out there. But you can date for as long as you want. But once you're married and you have to begin joining, the ugly parts that you really don't want others to see, even though you love this person, you're in love, you want to spend your life with them, there's still some things that you just might not want to come to the surface just yet. That goes for anybody. It's the same with business. If you want it to be successful, though, you have to be open. You have to be honest, even if it's ugly, right? Through good and through bad, you have to be open and honest. So the financials, it's really, that's the kicker. To me, that's the most pivotal piece in the merger and the acquisition process. Because if the financials are terrible, you can run into a few different type of problems. So you want to make sure that this is a successful merger and that you, on the other end, are not going to be taking on too much debt by acquiring this new brand that you begin to go belly up, right? So pay attention to all the financials. Then you want to determine how much it's going to cost to operate everything. So you looked at the structure. You and leadership get along great. The cultures are pretty much similar. You figured out you're going to brand the new merger. The financials are, there's a few hiccups, but nothing that you can't get past. Now you want to determine how much it's going to cost to actually do what we're saying we're trying to do. So if you're merging with, let's say you make hats and you're merging with an apparel shop, you want to make sure you're still going to be able to create your hats, that the manufacturing cost doesn't spike too high that you're not able to cover your end. Are you going to be in charge of covering that? Who's responsible for what? Is it a joint effort and the full thing? This goes into that operating agreement. And when you're sitting down writing up this contract, this is what we will do. This is what we won't do. All of that goes into determining how much is it going to cost to get business operations handled. And you want to do your due diligence next. So, you don't want to get so far into the merger and you're almost at the finish line. And then you realize you forgot to, dot some I's and cross some of your T's, right? So that's why I always say legal counsel is some of the best counsel you can possibly get. You want to make sure everything is good to go. You want another pair of eyes to double check everything that you're doing. You just want to make sure that you're being careful because, again, this is like a marriage. You're joining everything together. So once it's together, you got to wake up to that the next day, right? So you just want to make sure you're doing everything you need to do on your end, so that when you go into this merger, you have all the facts and all the things that need to get worked on. And then after that, while you're doing your due diligence, I should say, you want to value the company. So how much is your company worth? And how much is the other company worth? You want to look into the assets. You want to look into your liabilities, because you want this to be a successful merger, right? No one wants to join forces and then it flops. So you want to make sure that the companies are being valued correctly. If you're acquiring a company, you want to make sure you're not spending too much for what it's actually worth in the market. That's why you want to get the number crunches. Again, you want to get them involved and make sure they're able to double check your numbers and, make sure everything's going good. A lot of times, especially when you're a small business, you're new to this, you want to lean on the experts who can, who have experience and who can give you that knowledge while you're going through it. And again, be transparent. You want to be as honest as possible. There's, keeping confidentiality is great, but eventually, you're going to have to open up, especially when you start figuring out business operation costs and, roles and how much those roles will get paid. And what about your salaried employees? Do you have hourly employees? Or, depending on the type of merger that you're doing, there's a lot of operating costs that get involved. You want to make sure that you're being open. If you have staff who you have assured will not be let go during a merger, and that turns out not to be true, that taints the company, and that can look bad once you all go public with the merger. So the little small things that we tend to keep away because we just don't want anyone to worry, that while the intention is good, that only does harm. So you want to be very, very honest during this time. And finally, you just want to keep up the momentum. You don't want to start off hot and then halfway through you're fizzling, and then by the end it's like, man, we should have never even done this, right? It's easy to get, wrapped up in all the excitement and the potential profits that you could possibly gain, but it's pretty hard. It's pretty difficult, in certain industries, especially when you're doing a merger. So be mindful, keep up the momentum, make sure you're keeping your staff at ease or your team at ease while going through these mergers and acquisitions, okay? All right, so we're going to take a quick break, and then when we come back, we're going to get into my favorite part of the show. It's the Hometown Heroes, just discussing some businesses who are involved in mergers and acquisitions. So stay locked in. We'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Again, today we're talking about acquisitions and mergers, and we briefly discussed, what an acquisition is. That's normally when you're acquiring another brand, so you might be the bigger brand looking to buy, or the bigger corporation looking to purchase or buy out a smaller corporation or business. You want to pay attention to how certain brands are structured. You want to make sure that everything that you're doing on your end is open. So by that, I mean transparency. You don't want to be hiding certain financial information. You don't want to hide some accounts that may be in the negative, or some bills that may be in the rears. You want to be very, very open and honest if you're seriously considering merger and acquisition. Now, I understand some things are confidential, so you may not want to put everything out there at first. That's why there's normally it normally takes a little while to get through certain mergers. Some mergers, the process can take years because, my legal team is saying this and your legal team is saying that, and we have to renegotiate, redo numbers, you may have to revalue a company. So there's a few different things that get involved with mergers and acquisitions. And we gave some tips on how you can go about doing mergers and acquisitions. Sometimes those who are acquiring another brand are looking for companies that may be in distress, who may be, even in some instances, they may want to merge or do an acquisition with a brand who is closer involved with the public. So as we know, businesses that get to such a big state, it's kind of hard to be really involved with the public. It's kind of hard to really, understand the sentiments of your customers and what they need and things of that nature. So you may need to merge with a brand who actually has the capacity to deal with the customer front. They may have the capacity, it might be a tech merger, and they may have the capacity to build a certain swivel on some of your desktop computers, and, they have some good tech on their end as well. And then you guys decide, hey, we could both, I have the public attraction, you have the technical skills. We may need to join together. It might benefit me best if we join together and make this merger possible. So again, there's a plethora of reasons why a company would decide to go about business in this way. Some for good, some for bad, some just see an opportunity and want to take advantage of it. So right now, we're going to get into hometown heroes. And these are just some small time businesses. They may be big compared to your business if you're a business owner. They may be small compared to others. But these are just some brands that really caught my eye, caught my attention. It made me realize, it's possible for anyone to merge. Now, the one thing that you want to be careful of is confusing a joint venture and comparing that to a merger and acquisition. It's two very different things. The biggest difference is time. So mergers and acquisitions are normally for the long term. So you're looking to buy out this brand, and for years to come, you're expecting to get this profit. That's why when you value the company, sometimes they do certain formulas and come up with different ways of seeing how much the company will be worth in a few years. So you just want to pay attention to that. It's very different from a joint venture who, like, for example, there's a handbag company called Telfer Global, and they did a joint venture with Uggs, and they have a certain handbag that has the same Ugg wool material with the same materials that Telfer uses to create their bag, and it's their joint venture bag, and it's for a limited time, and you can purchase it and things of that nature. Now, if they were to merge together, you might have Telfer Uggs, right? So there might be a boot that looks like a Telfer bag, but has the Ugg build. And from there, they would begin to sell their products, and this would be an all-the-time thing, and they would project in the future to have certain products and certain services available. So that's a major difference. So when we're talking about these businesses that have merged, we're talking about businesses who are looking at the long term, and they see a need in the market, and they feel like they can fulfill that need with the help of another brand. So let's hop right into the Hometown Heroes. There was 2 banks that decided to join forces. We learned about it more so in the summer of last year of 2020. At that point, they were already in that state for about a year. And the banks are City First Bank, and Broadway Federal Bank. They announced their merger. And combined, they would have more than $1 billion in assets. More than $1 billion in assets by joining forces. Again, there's many reasons why brands join together, but normally it's because of their green, right? It's because of those finances and how they'll be able to really expand business operations. Instead of maybe seeking investors, you might seek to merge. So that's what these 2 banks did. The City First president, who's also the CEO, Brian E. Argret, he said that they had been working on the merger for a little while, and they just felt like it made sense to deliver some additional resources to both the bank's communities. So the Los Angeles bank based Broadway Federal, it's a community-oriented bank, mainly focuses on savings and providing conventional loans to minority consumers who feel that they are, ignored by mainstream commercial banks. There's some case studies that show that as well. So these 2 banks, they saw a need in their community and decided that they would better be able to assist these customers get what they need from financial institutions where they feel like the traditional banks just aren't really meeting that need. City First, who's based in Washington, said that it's more so an impact-driven bank, and they tried to help the underprivileged people in communities as well. And that was the reason why they just felt that this merger was good for the community. It was going to be, something that they could look on and really feel like they're making impact. And it just gives more lending power. So normally these banks, especially if you have business loans and you give out different type of conventional loans to consumers, there has to be some way to fund it, right? And if you're a small bank and you're looking to make larger impact, again, there has to be some type of way to fund this, right? So joining forces for those 2 banks, has been a pretty nice case study to pay attention to. So right now, this merger is still in the works. And as of January, the two banks announced that they have received the regulatory approvals required to complete the proposed merger. So we'll be keeping our eye out on that. I'm looking forward to seeing how that plays out. I'm wondering if they're going to just rebrand altogether, especially because one is based in Washington, the other is based in Los Angeles. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. Sometimes in business, mergers go great all the way up until the end, and then something blows up. So I'm definitely keeping my eye out on that merger. I think that's going to be pretty cool. The other hometown hero that I would like to discuss briefly is called Funding Circle. So it was started in 2010 The headquarters are in London, United Kingdom. And what the Funding Circle does is it's basically a good option for small businesses who are at least in year 2 of operations. And they're basically an online lender. They have their paycheck protection applications, very, very similar to other small banking needs like Bluevine, for example. They handle small business loans, and you can get in contact with them, and they also assist with getting the capital that may be needed to acquire another brand. So if you're a business who is looking to acquire a brand, you may want to reach out to someone like Funding Circle, because there's, they've had over $15 billion lent out to around 100,000 small businesses, and that's globally. So that's something definitely to pay attention to. Now, obviously, you want to always do your due diligence, and you want to make sure that the brands that you're looking to acquire, the brands that you're looking to support, you want to make sure that they are a fit for you and your company. You want to make sure that they align with your vision, and that they aren't a brand that you don't think you can see yourself doing business with in the future, right? So again, in the beginning, everything is nice and sweet, but eventually, you're going to have to really take the, roll your sleeves up and get to work. So you want to make sure the company that you're doing the work with is on the same page as you. So if you're a lender helping businesses to acquire or merge, you want to make sure that that's a company that you actually want to assist. And if you're a business who's looking to merge with another business, you want to just make sure your ideals match, okay? So that wraps up our episode for today. Thank you so much for listening to the GSMC Business News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I just want to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show, write a nice review, let us know how you feel. That all helps. Make sure you're following us on Twitter. We're always tweeting new business news, trends, updates, daily stock information, things of that nature. So make sure you check us out on Twitter, all right? Thanks for listening to all the episodes, and talk to you soon. Peace.
You've been listening to the GSMC Business News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type GSMC into your favorite podcast app to find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news. Please subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's podcast.